So people got some pretty strong opinions about this game, and here when I say the game, I'm really talking about the story. Many are claiming that it sucks or that the writing is terrible, and there are definitely some valid points there in terms of pacing and putting the climax in the middle of the game, or some underdeveloped characters who just seem to die whenever. But for the purpose of this video, I just want to focus on one, two-ish points that really stood out to me as exceptional and worth talking about. So the points I want to talk about today are, number one, the inciting incident of the game and why it works, and to touch a little bit on getting to play as the enemy. And because I can't really talk about what I want to talk about without going full spoilers, here's your spoiler alert. So first off, I just want to say I think a big reason why these moments land so hard for me is the outstanding work done in the animation and acting and directing in this game. It's truly next level and honestly deserves a huge shout out. So with that said, this story kicks off with an absolute gut punch. Joel, the main character from the last game, is brutally murdered only a couple hours into the game by a group of unknowns right in front of his surrogate daughter, Ellie. Knowing nothing about the first game, this would still be absolutely shocking, but no more so than if it was, let's say, Dina, Ellie's new girlfriend, or Jesse, her recon partner. Both of those, up until this point, have had about as much screen time as Joel, but the relationship between Ellie and Joel is special to us because we know about it, even though it seems to be a little strained at the moment. More on that later. But no, it had to be Joel that got killed, specifically for the fans of the last game, because only his death would elicit that visceral response that the writers really hoped to get from the players. And yeah, it pissed a lot of people off. Why did they do that? Couldn't they have done that later? Couldn't we have had more time with him? Like, what the hell? Like, why? He's a main character. Why did they do this? But I mean, his arc wrapped up at the end of the last game. To include him in this game with him and Ellie going on an adventure, sure, you could have made it work, but that would be more of the same. The point here is that you didn't have enough time with Joel. That loss hurts and it hits you hard, and that's what Ellie feels, and that's what they want you, the player, to feel, that blind hatred. They want you to feel sick. They want you to feel powerless. They want you to feel like you were robbed. Again, if it was Dina or Jesse, you would have been told how to feel instead of actually feeling it. And even though that was a hard choice for them to make, I applaud them for it. I mean, it really hit me in a way that not a lot of games have.
Jesse! They're down here!
And to add more salt to the wound, this wasn't a heroic death. This wasn't a dragged out one where he's saying his final goodbyes in Ellie's arm and they seem to make peace right before he passes away. No, it was brutal. And it's a crappy feeling for sure. And it definitely took some guts on the part of the studio to do this. And a lot about what makes this first scene work, aside from previous knowledge of the game, is how they choose to present information to you. Not just here, but from the moment you start the game and threading through the rest of it. The unraveling of Ellie's final moments with Joel is a great example of this. All we know off the start is that they're fighting, but we don't know why.
Then Joel decked him,
More of a push.
and then you got mad at Joel. That part confused me.
It was a strange night, man.
Is this some sort of teenage angst? Did they have a falling out between the 4 years that passed between the end of the last game and this one? Was their fight last night a one-off? Was it something ongoing? Through flashbacks, we get to play as Ellie and Joel in these brief moments together, and we witness as Ellie sort of figures out what happened after the events of the last game.
The way Naughty Dog chooses to present this information throughout the game adds more layers to Joel's death and makes it even more devastating the more we uncover.
If you lie to me one more time, I'm gone. You will never see me again.
So right at the end, we get a flash of Joel right as Ellie is about to finish off Abby. And this isn't the normal brutal visual that we've been seeing up until this point, but a peaceful one of Joel sitting on the porch. This seems to flip a switch in Ellie, and instead of going through with her revenge, she lets Abby go. And this choice has definitely angered a lot of people. Ellie has come all this way. She's lost so much. She's done so much and killed so many people already. Why doesn't she go through with it? Where's our closure? And it's not until Abby leaves and we really see the full scene with Joel play out that we get that closure that we've been lacking since the start of the game. We see Ellie confront Joel after the night of their big fight, and we see everything play out, and she lays bare all the feelings she's had up until this point. After hearing her out, all Joel can say is that if he had the chance, he would do it all again. Ellie's reply is that she hates him, and that she can probably never forgive him for what he's done, but that she's willing to try. It's a really loving moment between these two, between a father and a daughter. A moment that reaffirms that even though she hates him, there's still a love there. Ellie knows that she can't undo what Joel did, and that the only way to move forward, the only way to heal, is through forgiveness. To kill Abby in the end would be to spit on the memory of Joel. She would be acting out of reckless rage and passion that she despised Joel for. It's in this final moment that Ellie realizes that killing Abby won't make her feel better. Killing Abby won't give her that time back that she lost with Joel, that time to fully heal and get over what he did. I mean, of course, she never came to this realization earlier because, well, game's got a game. But aside from that, the people that she was killing, they meant nothing to her. She was so single-minded in her focus on revenge that their deaths never gave her reason to stop and reflect. It wasn't until she actually had Abby in her hands and was about to go through with it that it sort of clicked, that I'm about to get what I want, but will this actually make that pain go away? And that presentation of Ellie and Joel's relationship throughout the game and how it affects basically the very first scene until the very last scene really hit hard for me. And again, I applaud Naughty Dog for the choice, as tough as it was to make. The other big narrative point I wanted to touch on was probably the one that had the people most upset. Right as the game hits its climactic moment, it cuts to black, and then you wake up as Abby. That's right, the woman you've hated this whole time, you now have to spend the next 10 plus hours playing as. And this was a tough one, for sure. This is hard to get over. Stepping into Abby's shoes is hard. And like Ellie, you've been driven up until this point to want nothing but to see her life snuffed out. And yes, I'll admit, I may have let Abby die a few times just out of spite. But obviously the goal here is to humanize Abby and her friends, to show her story and to understand that for her, Joel was the villain. And even though this story choice didn't really work well for me structurally, as jarring as it was and as dragged out as it was, I applaud their choice in trying to keep the game fresh. Sure, in books and movies you can see things from the point of view of the villain, but only in gaming can you step into their shoes and directly control their actions. To form a real bond with this person, Naughty Dog really tried to flesh out the enemy faction here, to show that yes, humans exist on both sides. Everyone has their reasons and justifications for their actions. And once you step back into the climactic moment, now from Abby's point of view, you may have a different opinion about her. Or maybe not. I mean, after all, this is a story of revenge, right? And Abby did kill Joel, the person you love. But at the same time, the theme of revenge here, it's really only surface level. At its core, when you really look into it, this is a story about forgiveness. It's a story about forgiving those you love who may have hurt you, and even forgiving those you don't know who may have hurt you through their own actions, whether intentionally or not. And by the end of the game, if you can't understand why Ellie let Abby go, despite everything leading up to that moment, despite, again, everything she lost, then you weren't paying attention to the real theme of this game. So that's just it. A couple of things I really liked about the choices made in Last of Us Part 2. Rarely do we get a game like this that's so massive and so divisive over something as simple as just the story. I wanted to weigh in with my thoughts about what I thought was really good about this game and strongly recommend anyone to check it out. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for letting me talk gaming to you today.